DND number 9, Circle of Life in Jesus' Name, Chapter 6. It's April 3rd, Wednesday morning, Kino Martial Arts Studio, Newport, California. Do it again, Grandmaster Kino demanded. Breathing hard, Gabe went through the sequence again. Punch left, uppercut right, roundhouse, low kick knee, front kick, spinning back kick. He stopped, listening for more direction, sweat pouring, breath coming in gasps now. If you move too slow on the spinning back, it broadcasts what you're doing. Focus your energy on that. Gabe nodded and held up a finger. I'm going to be sick. Eric nodded. Go ahead, and don't forget to rinse your mouth and sip some electro water before you come back. Gabe took off for the restroom. Eric watched him go. You're being really hard on him, Jason remarked. The hardest I've ever seen you be. Mind if I ask why? Eric nodded. Because he's special, he said softly. The rest of the entourage nodded in agreement. Eric looked around at Team Gabe. Jason Lee, Jeff Davis, Mark Adams and his adopted son, Logan Adams, Shelley, and finally granddaughter, Taylor, who'd insisted she be on his team rather than her own father. Hormones definitely involved in that one, in that decision. Ricky's team, actually Team Julian now, consisted of Joey Adams, Justin Lee, Jeffy and Cameron Wallace, young Eric, Kino, and JoJo Adams. Gabriel Tanner was 17 years old, 6 feet and 1/2 inches tall, and 180 pounds, while Julian Washington was 23 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, and 195 pounds. At first glance, one might think a fully grown man is fighting a boy, advantaged Julian, but not necessarily. Ricky had fought many an opponent who outweighed him or had a longer reach. Eric was somewhat surprised when the opponent Ricky chose had those qualities, because Ricky would know that Eric knew how to counteract those qualities. Then again, because Ricky would know, he'd know exactly what sequences Eric would use and what strategy he would pursue. Eric smiled. It was going to be tough to outthink his son. Tough, but delightful. Gabe was probably faster, quicker, a huge bonus, probably being the operative word. Eric needed film. Jason? Yes, sir? Do you think you can find me some video on this guy? Well, if anyone can, I can. Do it. Yes, sir. Gabe came trotting back in. He approached Grandmaster Kino and bowed. Feeling better? Yes, sir. He glanced at Taylor. It was pretty embarrassing to have to run to go be sick with her there and fully aware of it. Focus, Eric snapped. Gabe swallowed. Yes, sir. Eric looked around. Mark, would you care to oblige us on the mats? Mark smiled. Happy to, he said as he bowed. He stepped onto the mat and proceeded to kick Gabe's butt. Eric coached, directed, redirected, and corrected throughout. He had others join in the battle until at one point, Gabe fought Mark, Logan, Jason, and a somewhat gimpy Jeff at the same time. He finally lay flat on his back, gasping for breath, literal tears running from the outer corners of his eyes. That was when Eric decided it was lunchtime. Logan reached a hand down and pulled Gabe to his feet. Thanks, Gabe mumbled. Logan chuckled. It's going to get easier, I swear. Gabe had no response. He only raised his eyebrows to show he had doubts about that. Lunch was catered, and they only had to move to the large outer lobby where tables had been set up. Taylor hung back. Grandma, she said softly. Shelley turned. Yes, baby girl. I'm just wondering, so what is the purpose of us girls being here if all we're ever going to do is get water or get towels and and hand over equipment? I mean, are we ever going to get to spar against Gabe? Well, all those little things that we've been taking care of are important, and it frees up the men to help with the actual training. I wouldn't want to waste Gabe's time by asking him to fight down against me or you. Fight down? Yeah, you know, fight someone who doesn't give him any competition. But you're a third Dan, and I'm a black belt just like he is. Well, we may have the same skills as him, but we don't have the power. Grandma, isn't that like sexist? Shelley put her hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. Who in the world have you been listening to? No, it's not sexist. It's science. It's physiology. It has to do with male hormones and muscle mass and density. Men are naturally stronger than women, and not just a little bit, but a lot. Well, what about female athletes who train a lot? Well, even then, there are only a small percentage of strong women who are as strong as weak men. I've trained almost every day of my life since I was 34. I'm a third Dan, so is your brother. Do you think if he punched me with all of his power that he would hurt me? She nodded. Well, yes, of course. But you're a lot older. No offense. Shelley laughed. None taken. Still, I guarantee you, if I was only 20, young Eric would hurt me. Badly. It doesn't bother me. I love being a woman. I love being able to do the things I'm able to do. All the different things I'm able to do. I love helping out in Gabe's training any way that I can help. Any way that I can help, because I love him as if he were my own. And I wouldn't even think to let my ego interfere with his well-being by wasting some of his training time to spar against me. I'm happy to help him stretch or to point out flaws in his form or to wet a cloth for his head. That's what's so cool about being women. We get to do a whole lot of different things, and we get to have babies. And that is not sexist, because if you were training, let's say for the next Mart or Keno Challenge, then I would put the same effort into helping you train. And because I'm so old, as you put it, I probably still wouldn't waste your time sparring against you. As a matter of fact, when your granddad was training me, he had me fight up. I sparred regularly against your dad, Jason, Justin, and Granddad. That's why I won. Gabe needs to train up. I get it, Taylor said, frowning. Shelley smiled at her. Sweetie, I understand. And it would be kind of fun for you to be able to spar with Gabe in a playful kind of way. You like him. I get it. It's hard not to like a guy like him. But sparring with him for you would be sort of like couples who go dancing together. I get it. And he's going to be leaving in just a few days. Taylor looked down. I guess you do understand. Shelley put her arm around her. What if, as a warm-up tomorrow, I suggest that the two of you do forms together, the complete form, the Keno form? She smiled. That would be cool. Okay, then, you better brush up. We wouldn't want him to show you up, and just maybe you'll show him up. However, keep in mind that if you do, he'll probably end up having to do 200 more push-ups. Taylor giggled. Well, I'll try hard to make that happen. New scene. April 3rd, Wednesday afternoon. Pine Forest Country Inn, Pine Forest, Georgia. Jake was not happy. He'd just been told to stand down by Sheriff Tyson. He should have just gone by himself to find Brett Adderman without involving Uncle Chaz, because that's how Ty found out his intentions. Jake had wanted to go see Brett and let him know in no uncertain terms that if the guy goes near Lena again, there will be consequences. He'd intended to give him a warning he couldn't ignore. What his Marine buddies jokingly called a stern warning. You get a stern warning from a Marine, and you will know without a doubt that you've been warned. But Ty had walked in on Jake's conversation with Uncle Chaz and vetoed the excursion. Tyson was Chaz's younger brother. Still, he was the sheriff, and they would show him respect. So they told Ty about Brett showing up at the grill last night, armed and looking for trouble. Tyson said he was on his way to go and speak with both William and Brett Adderman and would issue a formal warning of his own. Currently, Jake walked the property of the inn as he had many times when he wanted to think. This time, he was thinking about this thing, whatever it was, he had going with Lena. The property was large and included organic vegetable gardens from which they fed the guests, orchards, and a pecan grove, and at the very rear of the property, dense woods that ran into a creek about 100 yards farther. The large piece of property to the right of the inn, if you were facing it, and owned by the inn, held 8 country cottages. A little farther to the right, just past the cottages and closer to the creek at the rear of the property, separated by the inn's 12-foot-tall black iron fence, was the Tanner home, a large estate. The Tanners purchased that property from the inn. On the other side of the Tanner property was 20 more acres that used to be part of the Winstead home, which was also now owned by the inn. The home had been demolished. It held some bad mojo. Again, facing the inn to the left of it was an apple and pear grove, and farther down the pecan grove. Even farther to the left, one would eventually come to the paved road, and across that road, the Stewart Ranch. Amazingly, the road that ran in front of the inn was a dirt road. They'd left it that way because the Stewarts ran cattle down that dirt road twice a year. They'd been doing that for about 100 years. Also, that dirt road had sentimental value. Lisa Lewis, her name back before she met Chaz, had become caught in Chaz Stewart's cattle crossing. He rescued her, and that's how Uncle Chaz met Aunt Lisa. Now, here was Jake having feelings for their oldest child, and he didn't know what to do about it. He thought maybe he shouldn't do anything about it, but that's what he did last time, and it hurt her. She was at school at this minute, and all he could think about was her coming home, getting her alone, and kissing her again and again. The testosterone was pumping, he knew that, and since he couldn't go kick Brett Adderman's butt, he could do the next best thing, go to his father's studio and work it out with his dad, Master John Apple. He headed there, and by the time Jake arrived at the studio, located on Main Street in downtown Pine Forest, a class was just about to begin. He walked in, and 12 students all turned. His father looked up, questioning. "Mind if I join your class?" Jake asked. John smiled. "Not at all. Class, for those of you who don't know, this is my son Jacob. He's just back from being deployed. He's a second-degree black belt, and he'll be an asset to our class today." They all gave a slight bow, then turned back to face front, no one daring to break protocol. Jake smiled at that. His father always commanded complete respect of his students. Jake quickly changed clothes, and his father directed him to the front line because of his rank. He went through the entire class, at times taking time to help a student with a certain movement here and there. There were a few young teen boys who were immediate fans, so Jake took time to encourage them, and near the end of the class, it was time to spar. Jake and his father watched and directed and coached. It turned into a little bit of a competition. Jake coaching one student and John coaching the other. Jake was currently coaching a 15-year-old girl against a 20-something-year-old woman whom his father was coaching. Jake spoke softly to the girl, telling her to fake low and move high. The girl smiled and nodded. Jake watched as his coaching worked, and his father nodded at him. Jake grinned. This went on until each student had a turn to spar, and then one of the students suggested that Jake spar someone. Jake shook his head. "Why not?" one of the teen boys asked. "Oh, it wouldn't be fair." "Well, you could spar your dad," another offered. "Still wouldn't be fair." There was a rumble of laughter, and Jake looked at his dad, who had a glint of laughter in his eye. "I meant, Dad, that it wouldn't be fair to me." John laughed. "I don't think that's what you meant at all. Regardless, why don't you and I have a go, just to give your old man a workout?" The class cheered, and Jake was cornered. Sighing, he nodded and moved onto the mat. His father joined him. They bowed to each other. Jake decided to get it over with and took the first swing, and his father blocked and punched back. They went back and forth, punching, kicking, blocking, kicking. It went on for some time, neither one ever landing a solid hit. The class was murmuring in appreciation at first, but those sounds turned into outright cheering and applause by the end. The men bowed to each other and to the class. John lined the class up, spoke to them about assignments, and dismissed them. They all immediately went to shake Jake's hand. He laughed and chatted with them until they finally all took their leave. After everyone left, John and Jake stood together, breathing hard. "Any pointers, Dad?" Jake asked. "A few. You want to hear them?" "Oh, absolutely." Jake listened intently as his father, a seventh Dan, instructed him. They worked for another hour, sweat dripping, bodies tiring. It was just what Jake needed. Finally, his father ended the session. "Your mom is going to wonder where we are." Jake nodded. "You think it would be okay if I go see if Lena is home yet?" "Okay with me, sure. Okay with your mom? Probably. Okay with Lena? Who knows?" Jake laughed. "Well, I haven't had a chance to tell you. We kind of came to an understanding." John smiled. "You mean the understanding when you kissed her in the horse stable?" "Uncle Chaz?" John nodded. "You want to talk about it?" Jake shook his head. There's nothing really to say. I have feelings for her. She has them for me. That's about all we've acknowledged so far. Well, you know I'm here for you if you need to talk. I know. So go find her. But before you do, I have a question for you. How would you like to fly out to Cali for a few days with me and Keegan? Why? What's happening in Cali? Well, Gabe has gone out there and made an impression with the Kinos. They're having this mini competition. I think Keeg said they're actually calling it a mini mart. Grandmaster Kino will do like a tactical training for Gabe for 3 days, and Ricky will do the same for an opponent. Saturday will be a 7-round fight. 7 rounds? That's sick. Yep, and since Gabe is taught by me, I've been given honor and feel like I should reciprocate that honor and go out there to support the event. Jason Lee is sending a jet to pick us up. We'll leave tomorrow afternoon. That means we can watch Friday's training and Saturday's event, but we'll probably miss church. But we'll be home by Sunday afternoon. So, are you in? Oh, I wouldn't miss it. Great. Sounds like a fun time. I've got to look up here. See you at home. Eventually. Jake went into the men's dressing room and took a quick shower and headed out. He got on his bike and pulled his phone out, waited, and then smiled when Lena picked up. Hey. Hey, Bugs. Can I see you? Yes, I'm at home. Be right there. Okay. Oh, and wear pants. She giggled. Got it. She was outside waiting when he pulled up. He handed her a helmet. She put it on, jumped on the bike behind him, wrapped her arms around him, and he took off. She gave a slight squeal as they slid a bit on the dirt road, but in no time they were on the blacktop. He gunned it. He couldn't help but smile. It felt good to be on his bike, on a back road, the sun shining, and a beautiful girl wrapped around him. There was almost nothing missing except food. They came to a four-way stop, and he turned left. He was hungry, and this road led into town. He pulled into a drive-through, ordered up some burgers and fries, and stuffed them into the tank bag. As they pulled out, he couldn't help but notice the camera. The camera. Made myself laugh. As they pulled out, he couldn't help but notice the Camaro pulling in. He watched to see if they tried to follow him, but it appeared they didn't notice him. Not that the guy knew Jake drove a bike, but again, it's hard to miss Lena's red hair blowing back behind her as they drove. He headed to Wilson's Lake, hoping it wouldn't be too crowded. When he got there, though, there was definitely a crowd. Someone was having a party. He circled around to the far side of the lake where it was quiet. He pulled the food out of the tank bag and handed it to Lena, then pulled a blanket out and spread it on the ground. They sat. Jake said a quick blessing, and they dug into their food. His mouth stuffed full, he swallowed and asked, "So, how was your class today?" She shrugged and took a sip of the water bottle he'd handed to her. "It was boring. I'm pretty sure I'm going to change my major." "Really? To what?" "I want to be a vet." "Vet? You want to join the military?" She laughed and pushed her hair back out of her face. "Ha ha. A veterinarian." His brow furrowed. "Isn't that what Heather Anderson is doing?" "No, she's got a degree in animal husbandry, which has to do with managing and raising livestock." "Oh, got it. So, what do your parents have to say about you switching majors?" "Well, I know I surprised them, but they were somewhat supportive. I realize I've already cost them a good amount of money, but I'll figure out a way to pay them back." "So you really love animals, don't you?" "Yeah, I guess I do, especially horses. Well, mostly horses." "Well, instead of being a vet, you could just be a stable hand. That won't cost them any more money." "You're so funny tonight." He smiled at her as he finished his fries and reached for hers. "Well, I wasn't trying to be funny." "You were serious?" "Not really serious about you being a stable hand, but you could do something more to do with just horses, like run your own stables, teach riding to kids, or train horses." She frowned. He shrugged. "But what do I know? I'm just offering alternatives." She offered him her last fries and started taking her shoes off. He watched, fascinated with her every move. She folded up the legs of her jeans, stood, went to the edge of the lake, and dipped her toes in the cool water. She turned in a slow circle, closed her eyes, leaned her head back. Her hair blew behind her in the slight breeze. This girl. This girl, whom he'd tried to ignore for years, was wreaking havoc on his system. It felt like his blood was rushing through his body, making him almost lightheaded. He stood and went to her. She opened her eyes and smiled at him. He snaked an arm around her waist and pulled her to him. His hand skimmed her face, his head bent, and he kissed her. Ah, Bugs, what am I going to do about you? Well, that was good for a start, she said with a smile. He laughed. Don't promise what you're not willing to give. She shrugged. Back at you. She smiled sweetly, turning her body to place his back to the water. So, tell me a little bit about the training you had to go through. Is it as bad as they show in the movies? Oh, much harder than they show, because it's hard to put personal, internal struggles on a piece of film. So you think of yourself as pretty tough, she said, as she gave him a hard shove. But he was ready for her this time. He'd widened his stance and merely used her forward motion to throw her over his hip. She hit the water with a giant splash. He grinned at her, reached a hand out to her. How about best 2 out of 3, he offered. Sure, she said, as she allowed him to pull her from the water, and when she had his hand firmly in her grip, she jerked him forward. But he didn't budge. He only laughed. He kept hold of her hand, spun her around, and shoved her into the lake face first. She turned over and sat up, sputtering. Best 3 out of 5, he offered, extending his hand out to her again, 'cause like, I can do this all night. She wrinkled up her nose in an adorable pout. I concede, she said. He helped her from the water, and they went back to the blanket. He lifted the blanket up, shook it out, and wrapped it around her shoulders. There. Better? She nodded. Are you mad? No, I guess I had it coming to me. You really are different from other girls. Is that a compliment? Oh, most definitely. They sat together on the ground. I have to leave town for a few days. She looked up with surprise in her eyes. Already? My dad and I are going with Uncle Keegan out to California to see Gabe fight in a martial arts tournament. Oh, that sounds like fun. It will be. The Kinos are sponsoring it. It's kind of a big deal. We're going to stay with the Kinos. Well, that's always a good time. Would you like to come? It would be fun, but I have another class on Friday, and I don't have anyone to take care of the horses for me. Are you sure you can't miss the class? I mean, you're going to drop out anyway. I'm not dropping out and just changing majors, and this class is already paid for, and so I will finish it. He nodded. That's very responsible. She smiled and turned to him and reached up around his neck and pulled him to her for a kiss. She pushed him over, opened the blanket, and lay down on top of him. You're getting me all wet, he complained. That was the point, she giggled. He laughed, but pushed her off of him and stood up. Aw, come on, what's a little water? I'm not worried about the water, but rolling around with you on the ground is forbidden. Forbidden by who? Your father. Are you kidding me? What did he say? He said, no rolling around in the hay. Well, this is not hay, she pointed out. Semantics. He noticed her shiver. Let me get you home so you can change clothes before you end up sick. The sun's going down and you're going to be cold. Well, I hate for the evening to be over already. We just got started. Well, we could go to your house and make popcorn and talk. She agreed, and by the time they got back to her house, her teeth were chattering from the air hitting her wet clothes as they drove on the bike. They went inside through the front door. They found Leta's family in the back den. Chaz was playing video games with Matt and Charlie, while Lisa and 7-year-old Erilyn were coloring pictures of butterflies and caterpillars. They all looked up when they came in. Little accident? Chaz asked, taking note of his daughter's wet clothing and messy hair. Lena smirked and looked at Jake. Why don't you tell them what happened while I go change? She ran off giggling. Jake, decidedly uncomfortable, tried to think fast, but decided to stick with the truth. She tried to push me in the lake and didn't succeed, and I retaliated and did. You don't push girls in the water, 14-year-old Charlie said. He shrugged. At least that's what Dad says. Jake chuckled. Sorry, I guess I didn't get the memo. 12-year-old Matthew waved his controller. You want to play some video games with us? Well, I'd better. We got Call of Duty, Matt prodded. We have, Lisa corrected. Which one? Jake asked. We have Black Ops and Modern Warfare, Charlie answered. Jake shrugged. Well, then, I guess it couldn't hurt to do a few minutes of Modern Warfare. Chaz stood and offered his controller. Here, take my place. Jake took the controller and the boys went off into a different world to kill bad guys. 20 minutes into the game, Milena finally came back downstairs. Jake looked up at her as she entered the room. She wore a pair of gray sweatpants and a faded navy blue Gordon College sweatshirt. Her hair was wet as if it'd just been washed, her beautiful face freshly scrubbed. Why, he wondered, dressed like that, did she look so sexy? He blew out a breath. Jake, pay attention, Matt ordered. Oh, sorry. Lisa stood, leaving her husband to finish the current picture they'd been coloring. Everyone want some popcorn? Yes, the boys said quickly. And some ice cream, they added. Lena laughed. You want some help, Mom? Sure, honey. So why didn't you guys go to church tonight? Lena asked as she pulled out a large pot with a lid. Erilyn is sick. I think she has a little cold. Why? Were you hoping you and Jake would have the house to yourselves? Lena smiled and shrugged. Maybe. We haven't really had a chance to talk about. Lisa was busy spooning some organic coconut oil into the pot, put it on the burner, threw two corn kernels into the oil, and when Lena didn't go on, she turned. About what? Lena sighed. About us, I guess. The only thing we know so far is I had a crush on him and he actually once had a crush on me. All past tense? Lisa asked. Exactly. And you presently have feelings for him. Strong feelings? Lisa asked. Lena nodded, saying nothing else as she scooped ice cream into bowls and laid spoons out on the counter. The two kernels popped, one shooting out and right at Lena. She opened her mouth and tried to catch it, but missed. Lisa poured kernels into the pot to cover the bottom, put the lid on, and started to slide the pot back and forth on the burner. The corn started popping. The popping corn made it too loud to talk, so Lena pulled whipped cream and chocolate sauce out of the refrigerator and set them on a counter next to the spoons. Lisa picked up the pot, shook the popcorn out into a giant bowl, sprinkled sea salt and dill all over it, then turned to her daughter. We'll try to eat and retire early and get out of your way. It's going to be okay, honey. Thanks, Mom. I think it will. I mean, he's actually here, in my home, with me, sort of, she added. Well, what soldier could turn down Call of Duty, right? Lena grinned. He's not a soldier. He's a Marine. Lisa smiled. My bad. She lifted the bowl and carried it into the den. Controllers down, she ordered. No oily fingers on the games. Everyone immediately complied. Ice cream has already been put into bowls. Just go in and put what you want on it, Lena said. There was a mad scramble. The boys ran into the kitchen. Jake put his controller down and turned to take a handful of popcorn. Grams had taught everyone how to make the best popcorn. Organic everything, non-GMO, no vegetable oils. The dill was one of his favorites, but there was about any flavor you could think of, from caramel to pizza. Good stuff. Lena sat down on the sofa next to Jake and stuffed some popcorn in her mouth, and he smiled at her. Hey, you smell really good. Really? It's called soap and shampoo. You should try it sometimes. He laughed, lifted his arm and sniffed. Am I smelly? Well, not in a bad way. You smell like, she shrugged. Like a man, I guess. His eyes darkened. She was doing it again, getting to him. Here she sits, dressed about as casually as a girl could dress. No makeup, hair in wet tendrils down her back, feet bare, and he could eat her alive. He looked up to see her little 7-year-old replica walk up to him and smile sweetly. Hi, Erilyn, he said softly. She sniffed and wiped her nose on the back of her hand, held out a folded paper to him. I made this for you. He wiped his fingers on his jeans and took the paper and slowly unfolded it. Wow, he said softly. I think this is the prettiest picture anyone has ever given me. Look at that butterfly. Wow. Have you ever seen a butterfly like that? Erilyn shook her head and then smiled. No, but when you color, you can make up anything you want. Oh, I see. So there's purple and pink and green, he said, pointing at the different colors. Are those some of your favorite colors? Yep. He folded the paper back the way it was. I am going to keep this forever, he said solemnly. Erlen grinned. I'm going to go make you another one. Okay. Actually, Lisa said, you're going to either eat some popcorn or some ice cream and go to bed. Erlen made a face. No arguments. You have a cold and you need to rest. Say yes, ma'am, Chaz suddenly put in. Erlen frowned. Yes, ma'am, she muttered, and put a handful of popcorn into her mouth. Jake had to keep from laughing. Lena waited impatiently. Think I have a cold. Lena waited impatiently for her family to wind down and finally go upstairs. Lisa had tried to stay and clean up the mess in the kitchen, but Lena promised to take care of it. And once the fam was gone, Lena and Jake gathered the empty ice cream bowls and the popcorn and went into the kitchen. Lena quickly rinsed everything off and put it in the dishwasher. She turned in time to see Jake turn up the chocolate and squirt some into his mouth. What are you doing? She chided. He grinned. What does it look like? He did it again, and then, keeping the chocolate in his mouth, took the whipped cream and squirted it into his mouth. Lena laughed, and Jake swallowed the concoction. You want some? She shrugged. Sure. Who could turn down chocolate and whipped cream? He wiggled his finger at her. Come here. I don't think I trust you. I promise I won't make a mess. I don't want to have to wait another whole hour while you go take another shower. I did not take a whole hour. He chuckled at her indignation. Whatever. Come here. She came closer. Tilt your head back and open your mouth. She did, and he realized he'd made a mistake. He had to draw a deep breath to resist the urge to kiss her. He squirted the chocolate in her mouth, then quickly added the whipped cream, getting a little on her cheek. Oops, sorry. I swear that was an accident. She giggled, almost making the whole mess come out of her mouth. She quickly swallowed before that happened, then grabbed a paper towel and wiped her face off. She turned abruptly, wiped down the countertops, put away the chocolate and whipped cream, took his hand, turned off the light, and led him back to the den. They sat on the sofa and turned slightly toward each other so they could talk. It's been a fun night, she said. He nodded. Yeah, it has. I wish we could do it every night. She wasn't sure what to think about that. What did he mean by that? I mean, he said as if he'd read her mind, I really like you, Lena. You like me? He smiled at her. She didn't mess around. She liked getting right to it. That didn't bother him a bit. He didn't have a lot of time. Well, it's more than just like. He touched her cheek softly. You are an amazing girl, Bugs. Everything you do gets to me. I can't seem to get you out of my mind, which is maybe what I don't want to feel, since I will be going away again. But at the risk of missing you when I have to leave, I want to spend as much time with you as possible until then. She nodded her head. I feel the same way, Jake. I think about you all the time. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning, and the last thing at night, well, except God. He smiled and nodded, and that's how it should be. I'm glad you think that, because there's nothing more attractive than a man with a strong faith. And there's nothing more beautiful than a woman who thinks that. He put his arm around her. Bugs, I think I'm falling for you. She sniffed, and he pulled away and lifted her chin. Does that upset you? No, it's just that I've waited so long to hear you say that. I prayed about it. I dreamed about it. I'd gotten to where I thought it would never happen, and here you are saying the most beautiful words in the world to me. He smiled at her confession. So, that means I can safely say that you feel the same way? No, I don't feel the same way. I'm not maybe falling for you. I fell a long time ago. I don't think it. I know it. He sighed. Your honesty and forthrightness, it is so, I don't know, refreshing. I mean, you don't play any games. You just tell it like it is. I love that. She smiled at him using that word, love. He hadn't said he loved her, but for now it was close enough. She was about to ask him when he was going to kiss her, but didn't get a chance. He lifted her face in both of his large, strong hands, his rough, lethal hands that were at this moment gentle and loving, and he brushed his lips softly over hers before he finally kissed her, deeply and passionately, and when he pulled away, he smacked his lips together. You taste like whipped cream. New scene. It's April 3rd, Wednesday afternoon, Keno Martial Arts, Newport, California. Gabe's body felt slightly renewed after the nutritious lunch he'd consumed. They worked on his kicks for almost 3 hours. They took a break, consumed more food and electro water, and worked on the memorization of combination sequences. Near the end of the day, he sparred again. Grandmaster Keno explained that he knew he was exhausted, and he wanted Gabe to reach down somewhere deep inside him and come up with the reserves to spar. He was told to pretend the lives of his family depended on whether he was able to punch Jason, Mark, and Logan at least one time. Each at least one time. He did what he had to do, though they didn't make it easy on him. He finally hit Mark and Logan, and when at last he landed a punch against Jason, it was as if his body knew that was it. He fell flat on his back and laid there gasping for air. Logan leaned over him. You did it, Gabe. You saved your family. Mark also peered down at him. That was awesome, Gabe. Your mother will be forever grateful. Gabe didn't answer, mostly because he couldn't. Grandmaster Keno spoke softly. Let's end this first day of training the way we began it, please. Someone helped Gabe to his knees. Jason reached down for him. Come on, son. You did well. Gabe struggled to his knees, and Shelley was asked to pray. They all knelt in a circle as Shelley asked God to heal Gabe, to bless their endeavor, to guide them so that their impromptu tournament would bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to those who have ears to hear. When she finished, they all headed back to the Keno house. They intended to implement a technique they'd used back before Shelley fought in the mart, the plan of positive input. They would mostly be there together at the house as a team. Some would even spend the night, namely Logan and Taylor. They would all build light around Gabe with only positive thoughts and words, complete positivity, no lapses. At the house, Gabe showered and came to the dinner table. He was starving. The blessing was said and he ate heartily. When Jason's phone went off, he apologized. Being the head of Ameritech, he was always on call, so they were used to his phone buzzing. But as he glanced at the phone, he smiled. This is Jason. Yep. Fantastic. I'll have Mina send you a flight schedule. You bet. See you tomorrow. He smiled at Gabriel. Your dad, Master Apple, and Jake Apple will be arriving tomorrow afternoon. Gabe's face lit up. Awesome. Thank you so much, Master Lee, he said softly and slowly. Eric smiled. Gabriel Tanner always seemed to know when it was time to use someone's title as a show of respect. He was a special kid indeed. However, the small enthusiasm in his response told Eric the young man was barely hanging on. Gabe, Eric began, after dinner, we need some mind work in my study. Then I think you need to hit the bed. Oh, you won't get an argument from me about that, Gabe admitted. I bet, Logan said. You did awesome today, Gabe. I think you're my new hero. Hear, hear, Mark agreed. They all quickly jumped on the bandwagon. Eric nodded to everyone else. We have a meeting with the opposing team at this table in an hour. Before that, please be ready for a family prayer session before Gabe goes to bed. Yes, sir, they all responded. 15 minutes later, Gabe sat in a comfortable leather chair in front of Grandmaster Keno's large desk. I'm pleased with your work today, Gabe. You're being a real trooper. Thank you, sir. So, tell me how you're feeling about things. Gabe shook his head. I guess everything is okay. Eric smiled. Well, your body language tells me differently. Before you answered, you shook your head, which is a negative response. So, let's talk about your honest feelings. Are you perhaps a little scared? Gabe thought. Maybe. What do you think frightens you? I'm not sure. Are you afraid of getting hit? No, I get hit all the time in football, or I'm hitting someone. Contact doesn't scare me. Eric nodded. That's good. Are you afraid of failure? Well, sure. I mean, I don't want to fail. I hate to fail. Why? What will happen if you fail? Gabe thought a minute. Well, nothing will happen. My family and you, I imagine, and everyone else will probably tell me I did a good job, fought a good battle, and that will be that. We will, as long as you give it your all. I will do that, I swear. I believe you. So let's go back to what frightens you. Maybe it's the largeness of the event itself, like all the people who will be watching. It could be, but I play football in front of thousands of people. It doesn't really bother me. Actually, kind of jacks me up. The bigger the crowd, the better. Eric chuckled. Good to hear that. I hope I don't disappoint you, Gabe suddenly said. Ah, there we have it. You already said you would give it your all, so there's no danger of that. But what if my mind doesn't work fast enough? Like, what if I freeze and can't think of what to do next or what sequence to use? You know what I mean? I do. That's my purpose in being by your side. I guarantee you my mind won't freeze. Just listen to me and trust me. Like you told Taylor on Monday, I trust you at the shooting range. She was like you told Taylor on Monday to trust you at the shooting range. She was afraid, but you had complete control over the situation, right? Yes, sir, I did. Eric nodded. And so do I. I've been doing this a long time, and let me remind you of something. In the little class tourney we held yesterday morning, no one was coaching you. You did that all on your own. Gabe considered that and nodded. His eyes actually drifted closed for a second. I think that's enough for tonight. Will you join us in family prayer? Yes, sir, he said, yawning. They headed out to the living room where Team Gabe waited. Jeff was called on to pray, and he proceeded to bless Gabe with healing, to express gratitude for the opportunity taking place, to be a light to the world, and to ask for quickness of mind and body for them all, but especially for Gabe. He did it all in Jesus' name, and the family was dismissed until Ricky and the rest arrived. Gabe said good night and slowly made his way upstairs. Taylor watched him go, then decided to go upstairs herself. She went to his room and knocked softly. Gabe opened the door. When he saw her standing there, his heart skipped a beat. He smiled his surprise. Hi. Hey, I just wanted you to know that I think you're doing an awesome job. Thanks. I don't want to let your grandfather down. Well, I'm pretty sure that's impossible as long as you do the best you can do. He laughed. I've been hearing that a lot lately. Well, I just wanted to tell you that, so good night. She offered her hand to shake. But instead, he took it and raised it to his lips and kissed her finger. Thanks for being there, to help out and stuff. It means a lot. Her mouth opened, but she couldn't speak for a second. And finally, she smiled. My pleasure. She turned, her heart racing, and walked back downstairs. Gabe's heart was also racing, and his body too, so much so that he thought he might have trouble falling asleep, but the exhaustion was too much. Even battling against teenage hormones, and in only minutes he was sound asleep. New scene. They sat at the giant dining room table, Eric at the head, Ricky opposite him at the other end. To Eric's right were Shelley, Mark, Logan, Taylor, Jason, and Jeff. To Ricky's right sat Justin, Jeffy, Cam, Joey, young Eric, and JoJo. Bree sat to Ricky's left. Justin first gave a report on the venue. The event would be held at the Rosewood Sports Arena, the same place the first Keno Challenge had been held. Tickets were already on sale. Word of mouth traveled quickly through the Keno studios and other martial arts studios run by former students of Eric. A social media blast had already almost completely sold out the event. Bree spoke next. We thought we would simply go live through some social media influencers, but ESPN has decided to pick up the event. We will still allow the social media all access. We offered ringside seats at an exorbitant price, and they've been bought up by some celebs and politicians and the like. My assistant Jenny has been amazing in quickly setting up some pre-event entertainment and has hired event foods for concessions. By the way, the event has officially been given the name Keno Mini Mart. Bree, you are something else, Ricky said as he reached out and squeezed his wife's hand. That's what he said, she responded with a grin, causing a low rumble of laughter from the others except Taylor. Mom, Taylor admonished, which only caused more laughter. Ricky pressed on. Dad, just a thought. The quick response to this event makes me think it shouldn't be just a one-time thing. The number of students that wanted to be the chosen opponent were well over 100, and there would have been lots more than that had more known about it. Think of all of our schools in every state, even in every country. We could have regional events and then bring the winners here for a national event. If we could throw this one together in a few days' time, it shouldn't be too hard, especially if we hire someone to handle all the details. What do you think? Eric nodded. I think it's inspired. I think this thing we felt inclined to do is not just a fluke. I think God is leading us for a greater purpose. Me too. Once this first one is in the books, we can meet and brainstorm how we want to proceed. I look forward to it, Eric said. So, how'd your first day of training go with Julian? Ricky grinned. Wouldn't you like to know? But it was the looks of the other team members on Ricky's right that Eric was more interested in. It wasn't all confidence. A few chewing on their lips, a few brows furrowed. How'd yours go? Ricky countered. Eric smiled. Brilliantly. Everyone at the table was busy eyeing everyone else. It was Taylor who spoke. It's not really fair. Why not, Munchkin? Ricky asked his daughter. Because you guys have seen Gabe fight. Ricky grinned and shrugged. Well, sometimes life isn't fair. You have to compensate for that. But we don't have any video of your guy fighting. Ricky laughed. Well, that's because there is none. Now Jason laughed. Oh, there is now. Ricky looked up at his father, whose eyes were dancing in merriment. I hope having no video was not the reason you chose the opponent you did, Eric said. Of course not. It was only a plus. He shrugged. Doesn't matter either way. I love Gabe, but Julian is going to kill him. Eric smiled. Then this meeting is adjourned. They rose and bowed to each other, and those who were leaving for the night took their leave. Taylor and Logan went up to their rooms. Eric and Jason retired to Eric's study to watch film, and Shelley straightened up and went to bed. She was happy when only an hour later Eric tiptoed into the room. When he finally climbed into bed behind her, she turned to him and cuddled close. I remember when you were training me for the mart, how I was the one asleep while you and everyone else took care of business. And it's just cool to see it from your point of view. Gabe's been asleep for hours and you're just coming to bed, and I have a feeling you'll be the first one up in the morning. Well, I can't ask Gabe to give his all if I don't do the same. He's depending on me to bring him through this thing, and I intend to. Shelley put her hand on her husband's face. Every day, I don't think I could love you more than I already do. And then you say something like that, and I fall all over again. And then you say something like that, and I fall again too. He kissed her softly. Good night, my love. And that is the end of chapter 6.